Hello everyone, and good evening. Welcome to MACKMYRA Swedish Whiskies virtual tasting for this for tonight. My name is Richard McKeon, brand ambassador for MACKMYRA in the UK. Joining me, as always, and as he's done for the last year or so, religiously, Mickey Plummer over here. Hello, Mickey.
Hi, Rich. Good evening, ladies and gents. How the devil are we all?
Very good to have you back, Mick. Good to. It's my first time back in 2022, so I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, I've grown sick of doing real life tasting standing up, and I'm very glad to be sitting back down again. Also, hello everyone. I expect and hope that everyone's got their whiskey packs that's arrived with them, and just to explain a little bit about what we're going to do. Obviously, we're going to taste some whiskey this evening. We'll talk to you a bit, teach you a bit about MACKMYRA, some of the backgrounds about our distillery, how it was founded, where it came about, talk about the whiskies in turn, and Mick offers some little tips on tasting and nosing and things as we go, and then we tend to riff here and there and talk a bit about the larger whiskey world and things as well. Hopefully there'll be some interesting things in there for everyone this evening. Mick, I suppose a good point to start would be what the running order would be, if you care to go through that.
So you've all got your pack of 5 drams, and this evening we will be dramming in the order of Mack, Brooks, Svensk, Stjärnrök, and Svensk-rök.
Nice, yeah. I don't know if that was helpful pronouncing it so eloquently and properly and correctly.
We'll make a mash of it when we get to those drams, Rich, I'm sure.
I think so, yeah. We'll see if we'll get people to play along at home a bit and see if anyone can pronounce some of these things as well. So we've had great fun doing it. I'd say everyone, first tip of the evening would be to have a glass of water on hand. Have a little sip in between whiskies, sort of clear the palate somewhat, and also to add a drop or two of water as we go as well. If anyone has a pipette to hand or a straw or just anything. Carl that we've got in the background is quite want to put a little finger into the water and drip things over. So if you've got some clean hands and no hand antiseptic or whatever on there, then not a bad thing to do as well. Oh, and someone from Italy as well. Well, very welcome. International market tonight. As to the drams, Mick's gone through the order for it. Oh, this is really international. This is the most international. Yeah, fantastic. I would refrain from pouring the entire 5cl 50 ml whiskey. So we're going to be here for an hour or so this evening. So it's quite quick to put away that amount of whiskey. So just pour maybe half or whatever you feel like you want to try. And then that does two things. It leaves a little bit in the bottle for you to come back at a later date and enjoy it in your own time and see how things go. And then the second thing is a bit more time spent on it on your own and sort of see how you get along with things and what your favorite things might be as well. And one thing I'll say, but as we are about to start, please do comment, as some people have begun to do already. Thank you very much. Please do comment. Let us know where you're joining us from. Is it your first time with MACKMYRA? Have you ever heard of us before? Is this your first virtual tasting? Birthday shout outs, questions, whatever you have, please feel free to comment as we go. And we like these to be as interactive as possible, so it's not just you guys sitting at home and listening to me and Mick talk. Any questions you've got or things that you want to find out, we'll try and interact with everyone as we go. So Mick, if it's all right, I think I'll take away with the history, sort of the background. So MACKMYRA, we're Sweden's first single malt, specifically whiskey distillery, started in 1999. The idea was formed in 1998 when our 8 founding members were on a skiing trip together, something that they did once a year, had done for a few years. And then one year in 1998, pictured here, 3 of the 8 founders, everybody happened to bring a bottle of whiskey along with them. It wasn't planned. And then at some point during that skiing trip, somebody said, why is nobody making whiskey in Sweden? There's a huge appetite and market for whiskey in Sweden, predominantly Scotch, especially at the time. But no one, had been making it. I think there was a grain and some malt in the 60s, 70s, but nothing really about. And there's a lot of interest in whiskey in Sweden. There, I think last I heard, more whiskey clubs per capita in Sweden than any other country in the world. So it goes a long way to show just how keen the Swedes were, but no one making it. So production begins December 1999, and the first 3 years or so are sort of a pilot distillery in a series of founders' gardens, moving from one place to the next when neighbours complained about the peat smoke and the smells and the sounds of things. then we moved to the Brooks distillery, which we'll talk about more properly when we get to the Brooks whiskey, from where that whiskey takes its name. It's the original proper distillery that we moved into. And we were there until 2011, 2012, when we started producing in the Gravity distillery, which is, if you have heard of MACKMYRA before, the Gravity distillery could well be something that you've heard of or you've seen pictures of, which is our big vertical distillery, harnessing the power of gravity to move things from stage to stage. The hint's in the name, rather than energy being used to pump things from one room to the next. But again, we'll talk about that more when we get to Mac, the first whiskey. And I'd say it's probably a good time now to pour a little bit of that Mac out. Let it sit in the glass for a moment as I go through the rest of the history in the background. I mentioned the Gravity distillery. When we started, there were three founding principles of MACKMYRA. Were Swedishness, so they wanted everything to be as Swedish as possible. They didn't just want to be another Scottish distillery that happened to be in a different country. They wanted everything to be Swedish because it was their responsibility, they saw, to set a precedent and to try and create what Swedish whiskey could be, rather than just imitate and copy other people. And we'll expand a bit on where some of those Swedish things come from, but one easy place to start. Every ingredient we use, from the water, the barley, the yeast, and the peat, all come from Sweden. Everything is within Swedish borders. The second of the three principles were innovation. I think another thing, if you've heard of us before, it may well have been because of some of our seasonal releases that we have, where they can often be some quite weird and wonderful and innovative casks that have been used, as well as just general innovation around the company as well. That Mick and I have seen evidence of that ever since we started 2 years ago here. And the third one, going back to the Gravity distillery, is sustainability, the third founding principle, a massive thing for us. And there are lots of points to talk about that as we go through as well. So anyone that's of a sustainability or sustainable mindset that's here with us this evening, I think we've got lots of things that will make you happy that there's somebody out there in the world making whiskey and doing it the way that we do. Couple of other points before we get into Mac. We've got warehouses all over Sweden and a few different places in mainland Europe as well, Germany being one. The warehouses we have in Sweden, one of the ones we're most famous, it is the most famous, is the Budas mines, 50 meters below ground under a big mountain, a big James Bond-esque tunnel entrance that you then drive down into this old iron ore mine that's been converted into into a whiskey warehouse for us now. And 99% of our stocks are stored there underground, and the rest of them are in these little satellite warehouses. Tends to be 30-litre casks from our 30-litre cask program, where we sell small casks. One's on top of a mountain, thousands of feet in the air in a sky bar, Luftstalen, we can see here. That's the top, and then underneath that sky lounge is a circular warehouse. So you can get the ski lift up to the top of the mountain, have a cup of coffee, try your sample from your cask of whiskey, and then you ski back down the mountain, so long as it's safe and responsible to do so, of course, and you're in a good condition. Another one that we've got is in the Stockholm archipelago in Fjordeholmene, which is my attempt again at the pronunciation of it. We can see here the larger island in the front of the picture here towards us. The piece of land closest to us, you can see that it's this big sort of rock, sort of like hemisphere of a rock there that is hollowed out. Used to be used as the Swedish Navy's one of their torpedo stores. So, they kept munitions there in times of war. And it's now, torpedoes have gone, and it's now filled with casks of whiskey. So if you have your casks there, you can nip over to Stockholm, get a little ferry bus across the island, and there you go. You're inside of a rock on a little island. Very cool place. We've got 3 key ranges, 2 of which we're trying this evening. So we've got our core range whiskies. We have our seasonal range whiskies. And we have our moment range whiskies. We'll talk a bit more about them as we go through. And then the last thing to mention before we get to Mac and hand over to Mick is the person who created every whiskey that we have in front of us this evening was our master blender, Angela D'Orazio, second woman in the Whiskey Magazine Hall of Fame. If anyone's ever heard of Jim McEwen, expect the seasoned whiskey drinkers in the crowd tonight. At home will have certainly heard of him, of Bamore and Bruichladdich, and then Ardnahoe fame, now consulting with them. One of the biggest names in whiskey was Angela's mentor, and she's been on doing your own thing for the last 15 years or so now, and doing very well at it as well. And every whiskey we've got here this evening was created by her. That's probably, Mick, I think, enough of a whistle-stop tour.
That's a good sale past, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, relatively succinct, I hope, and enough information there for people to have something to think about or pique their interest. So I'll pass over to you for whiskey number 1, please.
Sure. So you'll all have to excuse me. I'm currently partaking in Dry January to raise money for Cancer Research UK. It's going quite well, but in situations like this, can be a bit of a testing time. So I'll do a bit of nosing from the bottle, etc. So the first dram we've got in your glass there is Mac. It's our entry level. It's 40% ABV. Yeah, it is color corrected. It is chill filtered, but that's for tax purposes and availability purposes to get it around the world for an affordable price, quite frankly. But no, it's designed with the bartender in mind. It sits beautifully on your back bar. You can see it from quite a way away, even, and it really does attract the eye. So automatically you're drawn to it. It's great to use in cocktails. I quite enjoy this in a highball glass over some ice with some sparkling apple juice. But also at the same time, it's really good just as a single malt whiskey by itself, just in the glass, you know? So the casks that were used in making this up, were 100% Virgin American oak. And there's some, I know, so there's first fill American oak and Virgin American oak involved in it. Nothing else. Yeah, there's no ex-bourbon, there's no sherry, there's no nothing else involved in there. Yeah, so you're going to get a lot of sweetness on the nose and on the palate as well from that American oak influence. So for people that are pretty new to MACKMYRA, this is probably our most bourbon-like, because if you think about bourbon production, they can only use Virgin American oak. So to get all those the sweetnesses, those wood sugars out of the wood on that first fill are filling it up. That's what we've got at play here, really. One of the big differences, obviously, is the mash bill. We use 100% malted barley, where bourbon doesn't. They use like mixtures of corns and other grains and some barleys and all that sort of stuff as well to make up their bourbons. But yeah, so if you do like a nice sweet whiskey, then Mac is definitely going to be up your street. So let us know in the comments as you're nosing and tasting along what your thoughts are. I know this is a favourite one of ours, Rich. I've recently brought it back into the lineup for when we do festivals. I give it a hiatus for a little bit because I thought we were doing too much of it. But then, didn't fall out of love of it, obviously. But then got a reappreciation of it again when I reintroduce it to the lineup for festivals.
Interesting. I think there's enough in the range to do something cyclical, Mick. I think, I've got some time for that for sure. You can definitely get the sweetness that you'd expect to have from something that's been matured in American oak casks. It's definitely there, but with I think more fruits that come from our spirit character. That so you get the vanillas and caramels and stuff that you would expect to find from something that have been in those casks. But I always get like apple and pear, but pear drops. Appreciate we've got a pair of drops are across the continent, I guess. But
I'd like to think so, Rich. Yeah,
hard candy, pear flavored, sweets that you sort of suck on and eventually chew. That's what I always get with these. And but orchard fruits for sure. I think our spirit character would be described in simple terms would be orchard fruits. Warm, gentle spices, and then sometimes, quite often, would be like a vegetal, herbaceous sort of grounding note, earthy note, linking the sweetness and the spice together. With this, I don't get so much of that earthiness that you can find.
I think the earthiness and the herbalness tends to come more when we hit more towards the smokier drums that we do, Rich.
Yeah, definitely on the herbal side for sure. Yeah.
So the orchard fruit forward profile in our new make and that you get through a lot of our drams comes from our long fermentation time. So our fermentation time is the bit in between like making the beer before we make it into a whiskey really. The fermentation time there is between 5 to 7 days depending on the activity of the yeast. So we use a slow acting yeast or a baker's yeast. just quite slow acting. So we have to keep those fermentation times longer. So it's roughly twice industry standard. And the longer the fermentation time, the fruitier sort of elements really come through in that new make. And that's why we have quite an orchard fruit driven new make, and that followed through in the MACKMYRA DNA through our drams.
I think I'm partial to a long fermentation in something, because I like finding fruits and things in there. And yeah, as you say, the longer the fermentation, the longer you're making that sort of beer, the more esters and fruit notes you get. And which I think I've liked MACKMYRA since, long before starting, because I'm part of it.
I mean, Rich, the reason we wanted to join MACKMYRA to work from was because we were fans of MACKMYRA in the first place,
Indeed, it was. Yeah. So anyone joining us from home, please pop any thoughts you have in the chat. Any tasting notes? Can you find the apples and pears that we've been talking about, or the vanilla, caramel, or anything? Are there any other things that you can find? Please let us know, or questions that you might have as well. Mick, while we see if any of those comments or questions roll in, perhaps you could tell everyone a little bit about the Gravity Distillery, because this is the first whiskey to be created at the Gravity Distillery.
For sure. Before I do that, though, I thought we were going to go full on Chaz and Dave Cockney rhyming slang there when you started off with the apples and pears. No, anyway, so we won't digress down that road. But no, so the Gravity Distillery, like Rich said at the beginning, we've been operating since 2012. 35 meters tall and over 7 floors. Now, most people that have been on distillery tours go and they'll see a distillery layout and they'll go from left to right. We do the exact same process, but from top to bottom. So we send the malted barley up to the next to top floor. The top floor is our sky bar, but just underneath the sky bar, we send the malted barley up there. Yeah, where it goes through the milling process. Okay, where it's milled down into the husks, the flowers, and the sugars, etc. Yeah, and then all of that goes down to the next level. Yeah, where it gets sifted out and then into the mash tun. That's when we start to add in the hot water, okay, to start really bringing those sugars out that we can make into alcohol. From the mash tun, we go into our washbacks or our fermentation vessels. Yeah, that's where we then make the beer. So that's where we start to first produce alcohol. When we put the yeast then into the fermenters, we turn those sugars. The yeast eats the sugar and turns it as a byproduct into the alcohol. Once the 5 to 7 days is over and we were happy with the fermentation, we then send that down to the next level into the distillation process through our two stills. So we've got a 10,000 litre wash still and an 8,000 litre spirit still. We put our 6% beer, roughly 6% because of that longer fermentation time, roughly 6% beer into the first still, or the low wine still, or the weak one, as we call it in MACKMYRA. And that gives us roughly about a 20% ABV spirit. And then it goes into the spirit still, and then that gives us roughly a 70 to 72% new make spirit, which then gets watered down to 63% down at the bottom, and then into casks down in the filling store. So we do the exact same process as you're used to seeing in any other distillery in the world. We just do it from top to bottom as opposed to left to right. When we did our trials in the very beginning, we found we were 45% more efficient in the first year than we were at MACKMYRA Brook in our previous horizontal layout distillery. So, going back to what Rich said, amongst not only innovation and Swedishness, but that sustainability effort as well. Really cutting down on those byproducts that you're going to get from a horizontal setup.
Yeah, nice. I think that 45% less energy in the first year compared to the others, and bearing in mind we've probably only become more efficient in the years since.
As we tweaked the process and made it run more efficiently as we've gone on.
Yeah. If you're trying to reduce carbon footprint and emissions and energy consumption, a 45% reduction is enormous. You can't deny that. So we've had Daniela, thank you very much, has commented saying that she is finding the apple and pear taste very good. Thank you very much. And
her next comment. Yeah. I love it. I think that's brilliant.
And a sparkle in my nose, which to me I think effervescent. Bubbly, sparkling things. Yeah, I'll take that, and a freshness to it.
Try not to get your nose too close into your glass, Daniela.
Nick, do you want to pronounce this person's name?
Nope, we're going to call him H4 just because that's so much easier.
Well, I'm going to call him Harry. Yeah.
Or she's still got a bit of a cold, bless him.
Him or her would be calling Harry. Unfortunately, it's like cold. I'm very sorry that you can't get the full experience. But as I said at the beginning, if you just pour maybe a little bit this evening, then you've still got a good amount left, because I think we tend to send out some quite good sized samples when we do these tastings. So hang on to a bit. I hope you feel well soon, and you can get back to enjoying whiskey at its peak. And then Phil as well. I think if we haven't said hello to Phil so far, Phil Walker's in the building, friend of the brand. So hello, Phil, and good evening to you. Right, Mick, I'd say it's probably time to move into the Brooks whiskey then.
Yeah, for sure. So dram number 2 up is the cornerstone of the founding stone, really, literally the foundations of MACKMYRA, and it's recently just undergone an upgrade as well. So some regular viewers might know it as the Brooks whiskey from before, and I say a foundation of MACKMYRA because there's actually a bottle of the Blue Label Brooks whiskey buried in the foundations of the Gravity Distillery, and there is a small flagstone, I believe, Rich, in the distillery on the ground floor.
That's it.
Whereabouts.
That's what is in the packs as well. The original Brooks whiskey, the MVP. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about. Unfortunately, I don't have any Blue Label left. I've got it's grown up, older, brother, sister, cousin. Definitely the siblings, I think. Definitely the siblings. So the Blue Label Brooks whiskey you've got at the moment and this whiskey, they're made up exactly the same way. Yeah, it's the same ABV, it's the same cask makeup. Yeah, so the ABV is 41.4%. It's natural color and slightly cool filtered. So it's not as bad as chill, not as harsh as chill filtering. It's cool filtered, so it's slightly filtered to a certain degree, but at a warmer temperature. So the cask makeup, where we had a very uncomplex cask makeup, just American oak for Mac, we're starting to see now a bit more of a complex character and more complex cask makeup coming through when we step into Brooks whiskey. So every Brooks whiskey product we have on the market at the moment, whether that be you've come across a bottle of Blue Label, which you've got in your packs, or you get a bottle of the Brooks whiskey vintage 2008, or you come across our Moments range that we released last year in the Brooks Deluxe 1 and the Brooks Deluxe 2. All the cask makeup is exactly the same. But there's a slight difference in ABVs in the Moments, and there's age differences. That's the main thing, really. There's age differences. But all the cask makeup is the same, like I said. So the cask makeup is predominantly ex-bourbon casks. Yeah, we've got there's a single Swedish oak cask involved, a single Oloroso sherry cask involved as well. And out of that fairly big batch, there's one single ex-bourbon cask that contains a slightly unique recipe as well. And that's what we call our smoke tail. Now we'll go into our smoking process a little bit further on down the line when we get to our last 2 drams. But a smoke tail, basically, after we do a peated run, we then put through an unpeated run, so unpeated barley back through, but we've not cleaned our stills out or anything like that. So we put the unpeated run through and we capture that run and put it into ex-bourbon casks and mark it with a big black X. We know that then that's our smoke tail recipe. Okay, so it's not made with a smoky barley. It's not made with a peated barley, should I say, but it's the first run through after we've done a peated run, put to the side, and our master blender, our chief nosing officer, she would use them as like a chef would use salt and pepper. Where something needs a slight bit of elevation in a recipe, they'd use a smoke tail cask, and that's what's used here. So in a fairly big sized batch, there's 3/4 of a single cask of smoke tail used. Now, I personally, I don't get the hint of smoke through it. I know some people do out there, so if you do get it, fantastic. It's not lying to you. It is made with unpeated barley, but like I said, there's a single, 3/4 of a single cask of a slight smoke that's gone through it. So if you pick it up, very well done. Do you get it, Rich?
I've never been able to find it. I've been drinking Brooks whiskey for about 6 months before I found out that there was, maybe some smoke in there, and I'd never detected it once. And even somebody telling me, "Oh, there's some smoke in it," I've never been able to. However, as you said, there are some people that do. Some people, I think, is it 1 in 7,000 people have a high sensitivity to smoke, to phenols. The heat particles. So they can find it, and every now and then on tasting we do, somebody says, "Oh, is there a bit of smoke in that?" And then we get to tell them all about smoked ale recipes and things. Yeah.
Rich, I think some people try and pull the wool over our eyes occasionally as well. You see them nosing them, and you talk about the smoke, and they go, "Oh yeah, no, I get that." You're telling me that. You're only saying that because I've just told you it's in there.
It can happen, yeah, for sure. But what about tasting notes for you, Mick? On what do you get?
So I have to remember now for the Blue Label one. So for Blue Label, you can look back through previous videos that myself and Rich have done in the masterclass in its former life. That I always, one big tasting that stands out to me on the Blue Label Brooks whiskey, and that's foam bananas. Now I know we have somebody in from Holland, we've got a couple of people in from Germany, and a person from Italy as well, and obviously we've got a few people from the UK. So I don't know how well spread throughout Europe foam bananas were, but in the UK they were like penny sweets up to maybe 10 pence. In an expensive place. So when I was a kid, like up to 5p, and they used to sit on the counter in your local newspaper shop.
If you're in Harrods, if you're 10 pence for a penny sweet, you're paying too much, I think.
So foam bananas. So you get like that. I know I quite like it. I think it's a positive. I get like a fake banana-y, chemically sort of taste. It tastes better than that sounds, and that sounds like a horrendous way of explaining it. But yeah, that's what I get. I get foam bananas.
Yeah, like a very, very, very sweet artificial banana. Yeah. No, I think we hear quite a bit with this, and but I certainly find. Actually, I agree with Daniela there. So less wood in it. See, I think there's less cask influence probably in this, and more of our spirit character, more of MACKMYRA's sort of the actual liquid that we make, the notes coming from that come out in this, and that's because we're using, for the most part, sort of more gentle casks rather than American oak casks, which are gentle because they're sweet and things, but they have a lot to give and a lot to offer and put into the whiskey. Whereas these, because as Mick said, over 95% of the casks used for this are ex-bourbon. And that's a mixture of first and second fill ex-bourbon. For anyone that doesn't know what that means bourbon was in it originally, and then the first other thing that goes into it is the first fill, which is our spirit, which becomes whiskey, and then second fill, the first lot comes out, second lot goes in, and then we only use them twice, so we only ever use casks in a bourbon cask at least 2 times. And for any bourbon aficionados or fans out there, we get them from a mixture of 3 different places for the most part: Heaven Hill, Four Roses, and Jack Daniels. So first and second fill from them. I've just seen it's David, by the way, not Harry. Can find a bit of banana in there. And Steve, hello again. And love of foam banana. Yeah, they were one of my favourite.
They are crazy Moorish. Steve, you're right.
As well, yeah. Pineapple, yeah. So some tropical fruits. I mentioned earlier, our spirit character has quite often will have orchard fruits. Tropical fruits are definitely in the mix as well, I would say. So things like mango and pineapple and banana, I guess, is a tropical fruit, is it not, Mick? Would you call that a tropical?
Well, I don't think many bananas grow in the UK, mate. So pretty much when you were out in the UK, to me, it's fairly tropical-like. But no, I believe bananas are very tropical. Yes.
Banana back, yeah. But yeah, so tropicalness, tropical-ish to it for sure. I think we can find in there. But I think that often quite comes with when you're using good ex-bourbon casks and you have a good amount of maturation in there. Tropical fruits can definitely come through and come out to play for sure. Well, I'll say cheers. We'll have a little sip of mine, yeah.
Yeah, so keep the interactions coming, ladies and gentlemen. It's absolutely fantastic. It makes mine and Richard's life a lot easier and a lot better. when you guys tell us what you think, and we can riff off that a little bit and that as well, and interact with you, our lovely fans, consumers, customers, whatever which way you want to call yourselves, you know.
Yeah, maybe fans in the making. Let's say that. Let's not be too presumptuous, because we've got people that have joined for the first time this evening who have no idea who we are. We're just the people telling them about what's in the glass. So exactly. I think
I meant fans of the brand, not necessarily of us, Rich. You know.
yeah. They won't remember who we are afterwards. They'll just remember that they did a MACKMYRA tasting once, and yeah, hopefully had a good time at least. Yeah. Wow.
Brilliant. So keep that up. As we move on to dram number 3. So dram number 3 is where we start to really get really Swedish now, and start to really kick off that Swedish influence that we have, and start to really shine. So svensk ek, Swedish oak, literal translation. Svensk, yeah, I always turn it the bloody wrong way, Rich, honestly. So svensk ek, Swedish oak. Okay, so we're looking at. So we'll take a big jump up here in ABV, guys, as well, okay? We're jumping from 41.4 up to 46.1, and we'll often refer to that number as the MACKMYRA magic number. That's what we tend to do. That's what we tend to hold a lot of our releases at 46.1. Natural color, non-chill filtered, as Angela intended. So Swedish oak. It's not 100% Swedish oak, so it's roughly about 6 to 7 years maturation in ex-bourbon, and then we take 10% of that liquid and further mature it for 18 months in virgin Swedish oak. Okay, so on the front of the palate, you're going to get a lot of those familiar smells and tastes that you're going to get from an ex-bourbon, but then on the back of the nose and then on the back of the palate, once you've taken a sip, you're going to get quite a big hit of like a white pepper, sandalwood tobacco sort of feeling. Okay, that white pepper for sure. If that spiciness is a little bit too much for you, because this is 46.1%, it will take a drop of water quite nicely. Knocks that spice level down a little bit, yeah. And I mean a couple of drops. I don't mean pouring jugs and jugs of water in, but if that's what you want to do, that's up to you. But no, just literally just a couple of drops, yeah. Knocks that spice level down a little bit and allows more of those orchard fruits that me and Rich have already spoken about really come to the fore. Some people really love the spiciness. I'm a big fan of the spicy hit I get on the back of svensk ek. So I don't tend to, most days. Some days I'll tap a little bit of water in when I'm feeling a bit more like that, really. But in general, I'll take svensk ek as it is. I really do enjoy that spiciness on the back of the palate. What do you think, Rich?
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said there, and also the way that you drink yours. I'll have mine neat most of the time, but then sometimes I get, maybe my palate is being a bit more sensitive than usual. I'll add a drop or two of water to take some of the spice off. And I think you can definitely find a lot of the sweetness here, but I think it's for me and my nose, it's equal parts the sort of the sweetness you'd expect from ex-bourbon, but then also this like spicy, peppery, maybe a little bitter sort of note on the nose, but bitter the way that dark chocolate is bitter compared to milk chocolate, for example. So not bitter and it's going to make you go, and your lips in or anything, but a counterbalance to the sweetness. I think some of that peppery spice, so, yeah. The wood spice, yeah. I did just see Nicholas has popped a question in as we were moving from one whiskey to the other. Chat's great session. Well, there's a fan, Mick. Yeah. Thank you, Nicholas. What would be the main flavour difference from the blue and orange label? For me, that is because the orange label is a little bit older and all the casks that we use were from 2008. We mentioned earlier, I did, about how ex-bourbon casks, you can find more tropical notes with some spirits at least, the longer something's in. I think that the vintage version has more tropical notes to it, and a bit more, maybe a bit more of a buttery texture to it as well. I think would be, for me, the two big takeaways, because they're quite similar. They are very similar, but you can definitely tell the difference between the original and the vintage version of it. And I would say if anyone shops near them or interested in the vintage, certainly have a look at it. Actually, talking about buying bottles, something we didn't say at the beginning, Mick, there is an offer.
We do indeed have an offer on tonight. If you quite enjoy the core range, and when we get to Stjärnrök a little bit later on, if you enter the code on mackmyra.com, you enter Stjärnrök40 without the umlauts, etc. If you buy a bottle of Stjärnrök, you'll get 40% off any of our core range.
Okay, so to summarise that's Stjärnrök. You can see at the bottom, Stjärnrök 40. You put that in on the mackmyra.co.uk or .com website, and you can get you buy a bottle of Stjärnrök, the next whiskey that we're trying, and then you can get 40% off of a core range bottle. That's right, isn't it? And I think that includes the vintage, I would say, because that is part of the core now.
That's the core range now. Let's put the core range. So for me, I think the difference, like you said, there's a bit more of a mouthfeel on the vintage because of those extra 4 years. On average, and so it's more pineapple chunks than bananas, and where we jokingly referred to Brooks Blue Label before as our breakfast whiskey, because it's a little bit older and a bit more sophisticated. I call this now our brunch whiskey.
That's not going to catch on.
Well, I keep trying to tell people it, but So anyway. Back to Svensk Ek anyway, before we get too bad with that. So the spiciness of the Svensk Ek. Daniela, you find tobacco, definitely, on the back of the palate, that tobacco leaf sort of like flavour profile definitely does come through.
That's some of that bitter herbalness, that I was sort of talking about earlier, part of our character. I think that Swedish oak helps bring that forward, like you said, the smoky whiskies that we make bring some of that justness and that vegetal stuff forward. I think Swedish oak definitely helps there as well. Do you want to give people a bit of a background into Swedish oak itself, Mick?
I can do, Rich. Of course, I can do. One of my favourite subjects is Swedish oak. So Sweden has always grown oak, but not maybe in the prolific way that was required, really. So mainly in the southern part of Sweden, oak has always been grown. But back in 1830, just after the Napoleonic Wars, the Swedish Royal Navy, the Swedish Royal Family said, well, we need a future plan for future warship development, basically. We need to find a place where we can grow fantastic oak trees in a decent number. So they sent out 10 emissaries to cover Sweden and to find the ideal place. While on their travels, 3 emissaries come across a croft on the island of Visingsö, which is in the middle of Lake Vättern. Lake Vättern is Sweden's second largest lake. So they come across this croft. Outside this croft were 3 magnificent oak trees, and they went, I think this could be the place. So they chopped one of the oak trees down and took it back to Stockholm, where the Royal Navy and the Royal Family went, that's it. Wherever that tree was grown, that's where we want to plant our trees, our oak trees, for our future warships. Let's do that. So over a 10-year period, they planted something like 300,000 trees, which I think, unless anybody can correct me, is about 900 acres, roughly. That can quote me that can correct me on that, please do. If not, that's what I'm sticking with, because I'm pretty sure that's what I read. But as well as to stick with that Swedishness, obviously Swedish oak trees, they also went for obviously the sustainable approach by planting more trees, and they really went for that innovation, because now they're starting to plan roughly 100 to 160 years in advance, But unfortunately, about 30 years after they started that project, just a little small thing happened in the world, and that was what we all know now as the Industrial Revolution, and the very first steel clad hulls were starting to take to the water. So fast forward 160 years, and the keepers of the trees phoned up the MOD equivalent in Stockholm and went, that's your trees ready for your warships. Obviously, Stockholm burst into laughter, going, what's this guy on about? Wood for warships? We've not done that in years, mate. We've got or sparkling brand new metal ones out there. So obviously they had to find other uses for these trees. And some of those uses were furniture. And obviously then, on the back of that, given the conditions they grew up in, these trees are very, very tall and very, very straight with very, very little knots in them. Yeah. I mean, you look at that and you would not think in a million years that was an oak tree as we know them, especially in the UK. So floorboards were a fantastic way of using the wood for this as well. But we obviously use them for our whiskey casks. And if Cole brings that last slide back up there, the difference between European oak and American oak, you'll see that the grains are a lot tighter in the European oak. But because of the longer time it takes for the European oak to grow, there's not as many wood sugars produced, or the wood sugars have sort of like faded away. So the influence of Swedish oak over American oak is it's a lot older and a lot more weather beaten, essentially. Yeah. So it's the effects of it on the flavor profile for whiskeys, as you'll find it on the whiskey you're drinking now, is it's not as sweet. So you're going to get a lot more that white pepper, tobacco, walnut type of effect on it. So there's a lot less wood sugars in Swedish oak than there is in American oak.
And far more tannins and things as well, which is anyone that knows anything about European oak and wine and things like that as well, that European oak generally is quite high in tannins. American oak very low but high in sugar, or wood sugars, ligins and things, and which your vanillins and your things, your flavors come from there. And then Swedish oak grows just that little bit more slowly again than oak in the south of France, for example.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Great. Well, Mick, I always enjoy hearing that story, mate. It's cracking. While everyone's been enjoying, hopefully, or at least assessing that whiskey, while Mick was regaling us with a history of Swedish oak trees. Please feel free. Yeah, if you have any questions or tasting notes or anything, please pop them in the chat before we move on to the next. And and we'll pick them up as we go through. But it does look like, Mick, a few people there with some positive things to say about Svensk. This is my go-to whiskey, by the way. I'll say for me, out of the core range, I think more often than not, if I'm staying away with work and doing tastings here and there around the UK, and I've got a load of MACKMYRA with me, which I obviously do, Svensk will be the bottle that I usually pour a dram of when I'm in a hotel for the evening or something, and I want to have a little dram of something. This is my go-to one. Depending on the mood, but more often than not, this will be it. So, yeah.
Probably what I like to play with the most as well when it comes to cocktails and stuff, Rich, as well. But I've nailed down my favourite cocktail to make with the Svensk as well, and that's obviously my twist on a black Manhattan. So a Manhattan tradition is 2 parts rye, 1 part Amaro Montenegro, 2 dashes of orange bitters, and served in a chilled champagne coupe. Obviously stirred down, not shaken, stirred down, and served in a chilled champagne coupe. I replaced the rye with the Svensk because of that spiciness. Yeah, it's a really good replacement for rye whiskey. So I call it a Sviet Stockholm. Sviet being Swedish for black, and Stockholm because, well, that's in Sweden, and not really. There's no other, there's no complicated way of transferring that over to make a name up. So yeah, so I use 2 parts of the Svensk, 1 pot of Amaro Montenegro, which is a fantastic liquid all by itself, 2 dashes of orange bitters, stirred down over lots of ice, and then served in a chilled champagne coupe with a nice twist of orange peel as my garnish. If I can be bothered with the garnish, depends on how long my day's been.
Well, very nice. Well, it sounds delicious, mate, and I know you can make a good cocktail. So, cool. All right. Well, please, as I said, we're going to move on to the next whiskey now, onto Stjärnrök. But please, Stjärnrök. But please pop in comments, questions, or anything as we go. And again, I said at the beginning, if anyone's got their birthday today, let us know, and we'll give you a little shout out as well. But Mick, Stjärnrök then.
So, Stjärnrök, from our seasonal range that Richard touched upon earlier, we do 2 seasons a year, spring, summer, and autumn, winter. This is 2021's autumn, winter. And it's got it's 46.1% again, so it is at the MACKMYRA magic number. Natural colour, non-chill filtered. So it ticks all those boxes that a lot of whiskey fans do like from their dram. This has got quite a complicated cask makeup. And I'm going to round the numbers out, okay? So they're not exact. I'm going to round them out because it's easier to remember this way, okay? So roughly, and I mean roughly 60% of this recipe is made up of ex-bourbon casks, yeah, and 30 litre, so that's 200 litre ex-bourbon casks, 100 litre ex-bourbon casks, and 30 litre ex-Oloroso casks, okay? And that's contained liquid from our smoky, extra smoky, and smoke tail casks recipes. Okay, so remember, so our smoky, yeah, our extra smoky, which we'll talk about when we do Stjärnrök, yeah, and the smoke tail, which we mentioned previously. So it's quite a heavy smoke influence for 60%. Then 35% of the liquid to give it a bit more of a backbone. Some of our older ex-bourbon casks and some of our virgin American oak casks as well to give it a bit of spine there to sit on, yeah. And then to tie it all up, I think we're down to the final 5% now, Rich. So for the final 5%, we've used cloudberry wine seasoned Swedish oak casks to tie it all together. So like I said, it's quite a complicated cask recipe, cask makeup. But for me personally, it's culminated in producing one of my most favourite seasonals that we've ever done. It hits all the right notes for me personally. Last year, Yaknika was the one I went to put in my hit flask for rugby. This is now by surpassed that and then some. It's got the right amount of level of smoke in it for me. It's got the right level of sweetness. And it's just all around a fantastically drinkable dram, Rich. And I'm gutted I'm still doing dry January because whenever I open this, it just makes me want to pour a glass of it, honestly.
It looks very much as though you're just going to just neck it back out of the bottle.
Too tempting, but that's very, very irresponsible.
Yeah, I don't think
if I wasn't on dry January, that would be very irresponsible.
It doesn't send the message. I think, yeah, it doesn't encourage responsible drinking for sure. Out of the bottle. As soon as the camera's off, obviously, when we're backstage,
that's on my own back, Rich. You know what I mean? But no.
Cool. I love this as soon as it came out. Each to their own. Not everybody has to like the same thing. Of course, that's the beautiful thing about whiskey or about art in general. And whiskey is art. If a different release is called an expression for a reason, because it's a distillery or a producer trying to express themselves in some way through a release that they have. So with this, I'll be very interested to hear and see in the comments what people think. If you liked smoky whiskey before, is this something that you didn't like them before? Maybe you like this now. We hear that quite often with the next one that we've got. Or was it not quite for you and you prefer the other ones? Whatever you're thinking, please do let us know. Just it's very interesting for us to get an idea and a feel about how people think and what their take on the whiskies are. With this, if you got there's a Buddy Buddy. I'll let you read that one, Mick.
Yeah, absolutely love the seasonal releases. They never disappoint, and this is no exception. Love the sweet, unique smokiness. Yeah, couldn't really say it any better, really. And we'll touch on the smokiness and how we get that unique smokiness when we do the last dram. Mario, yeah, fantastic sweetness with a lovely little smoke. Yeah, me and Rich are big fans of another distillery that sits on a small island off the west coast of Scotland. We mention it quite often. Well, we did do. When we run the MACKMYRA in at the back end of last year. We won't mention it again because the MACKMYRA Masterclass, but yeah. And for us, I think their 18-year-old version of that particular one that we quite liked sat in that right spot. And this is not too far away from that, in my personal opinion. Obviously, it's a little bit younger, but maybe only by about 4 to 5 years, in all fairness, with the casks that have gone into making this up. But yeah, it sits right there with that lovely balance of sweet and smoke. So everybody knows that well, most people know that really enjoy whiskey, that sweet and peat really do go well together. That sweet smokiness really do sit quite well, especially this sort of time of year. It's still a bit chilly out. You're still needing a jacket to go out. Nice hit flask with this, a small hit flask, obviously, with this in when you're walking the dog. Do you know what I mean? Or walking the cat, your pet lizard, whatever it is you do, or just going out for a walk on yourself. A lovely clear night. So. You saw the intro video at the beginning. and we had like the clear sky and the stars and all that sort of stuff. This is what that's designed for. That nice bit of smoke to be enjoyed on a nice chilly evening, looking out on a clear starry sky, and just getting warm and enjoying that sweetened smoke.
So what does Stjärnrök mean, Mick? What does it translate into?
Stjärnrök translates as star smoke. So if you see anything in MACKMYRA and it's got the ROK and above the O it's got the two dots with the umlaut, Rök means smoke. So anything before or after that will be another translation of something else. But if you look out for Rök, that means it's going to be a smoky dram.
That's it, yeah. And this, you said about the sweet and smoke combination here, and I've seen that in the comments already previous, but sweet and smoky, that balance between the two is I'm drawn to that with almost any whiskey that I have. Yes, I don't want things to be one-dimensional. For example, there is a very famous super smoked whiskey brand from the west of Islay. It's got its own name, and it's named after a farm just down the road from this now world famous distillery, and that I've had some of those where it's very good because I enjoy smoky whiskey, but it's just smoke and there's not much else going on. But then I've had other ones from those guys as well where they've had the right amount of balance there as well, and especially if they put it. One of the ones I had was in a Sauternes cask, and some sweetness to it there, and then the smoke. Just having balance and not just one thing, I think, is so important for me.
Oh, very much so.
That smoke is more than detectable. You and I can't find it on the Brooks whiskey.
No.
But on here, definitely. However,
it's there.
It's there, but it's not the main show. It's not. No. It's an ensemble of instruments. It's a band. It's an orchestra. It's not just a solo artist, and it's just smoke and peat. This is sweet and smoke, and you can tell. Hopefully, people can detect that this is a MACKMYRA, some of the MACKMYRA characteristics with smoke on it as well. And I'll go and have a look at some of the comments that have come through. So I think we had one or two pop up then, but Mario.
I think Marco's comment there. Marco, have you do you know about our peating process by any chance? So I get a feeling by the last part of his comment there, he might just have a feeling about what we do with our peating process. But I'm not getting too much away at the moment. We'll cover it on the last dram. But smoke, balsamic smell. Yes, that sweetness again. 100% juniper in this whiskey. Okay, cool.
I've not heard balsamic to it before, but I can definitely get that sort of like sweet sharpness, but but delicious sweet sharpness to it. I get that for sure. And then Mario's sweetness with lovely little smoke. David. Not Harry. Love this smoky smell. Years ago, that was a no or a nothing for him. But times, smell, and taste are changing. Very glad to be part of that journey, wherever we are on it for you. Then I know we have Mick, the amount of people that we do tastings with, either virtually or in person, and there's always people that that never liked smoky before, because one or two of the ones that you try that are in behind every bar in the UK at least, and it's the same thing, and it's quite a pungent, punchy type of peat with a lot of medicinal iodine.
Comes in the green bottle.
Comes in the green bottle from the southeast of Islay, the Cadalton 3, one of those guys. But that can put some people off because it's quite big and there's a lot of thing. But then you can build up to that again, and if you start with peat, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be some big smoke show every time. As I was saying with this, more subtle. There's peat, you can find it on a scale, going anywhere from the place that's named after the farm near the distillery on the west of Islay I was mentioning, all the way down to the famous one from Orkney, I think, or Glen Scotia and Campbelltown or something. Very, very subtle amounts of smoke to it. And then where this is probably a little bit further up that bit, but there's more going on than just smoke and peat, and I think that's quite important. Have we got anything else in there? And then our bullies, we've seen bullies comment on there already. So this, I've always liked this one, Mick, the smoky Oloroso, and this has been the fastest set.
It sits right at the heart of it, doesn't it? That smoky Oloroso influence. It is beautiful. That sweet, that peat smell. It's just been fantastic for me, quite frankly. It's very easy to drink it. 46.1. It will take a little drop of water. Personally, most of the time, I don't think it needs it. But play around with your whiskey, guys. Yeah, play around with it.
there's one way. Mick and I have agreed on this since day one. It's one of the reasons why we've got along so well. We both agree that there is one way to drink whiskey, and that is however you please. If you want to add a drop of water, if you want to have it neat, if you want to add a splash of water, if you bought that bottle and you want to add Coca-Cola to it, do what makes you happy. Live your life. Don't let people tell you what to do. I mean, if you want to get the most out of the whiskey and experience that whiskey itself, maybe don't add, long drinks to it. But if you want to just enjoy yourself and you like, the flavor combinations that you get with a mixer, do what you please, basically, is what we say. But yeah, on that note, time to move on, I think, to Stjärnrök.
Before we move on to the last dram notes, I'll just re-emphasize the deal we've got on this evening. It's only the 40% off is only until midnight tonight. So that's use Stjärnrök 40, at MACKMYRA.com to receive, when you buy a bottle of Stjärnrök, enter Stjärnrök 40 and receive 40% off a bottle of any of the core range. So that's Mac, Brooks Vintage 2008, Svensk Ek and Stjärnrök.
Lovely.
And yeah, that leads us nicely on to the last one I mentioned, Stjärnrök. So no guesses, so no prizes for guessing what this means, because you obviously know Svensk means Swedish from when we did Svensk Ek, and Rök means smoke, because I did an explanation of Rök just now.
Actually, they were listening to you, Mick.
Well, there is that, Rich. There is that. Hopefully, people were listening. Can't guarantee. We can't obviously speak for everybody, but no. So again, sticking at MACKMYRA's magic number 46.1. We bring again not an overly complex cask makeup, but somewhat not run of the mill, shall we say? So we've taken American oak, Swedish oak, and Oloroso saturated bourbon casks, but we've kept all the casks small. The biggest casks that go into this are 128 litres. Then we've got 100 litres and down at 30 litres as well. So there's a good mix of all three amongst that there. And this is from our 100% peated expression. So our peated liquid that goes into this. And I'll get Rich to explain a little bit about our peating process, actually, Rich. What do you reckon?
Cool. Yeah, more than happy to do it. So we have mentioned all of the ingredients that we use are from Sweden, be it the water, the yeast, the barley, and then also the peat. When we started, there was nobody in Sweden were peating any malted barley, as in they weren't producing the malted barley that you need to make your whiskey. There was nobody making that was also putting smoke into the malt, into the barley, and skipping through some of the technical stuff quickly. When you're drying that barley out so that you can continue using it further down the line, you might dry that out with peat smoke. In Scotland, they used to do that in places where that was the only fuel source that they had, 200 years ago. And that's where some of the tradition of getting peated whiskies has come from. That smoke gets into the barley, and then when you start making your beer, basically your wash, and then your spirit, that smoke follows through. Nobody was doing this in Sweden. So the founders said, rather than import peated or smoked barley from overseas, as there's a big global market for that, they wanted everything to be Swedish. So they went around to look and find peat bogs in Sweden that they'd be able to use. And they did at the Kadin Mossen peat bogs, which is about 45 minute drive from the distillery. So pretty local, I would say. On the sustainability front, we only use the very top, very, very, very top layer of peat. So we don't go down far into it. So we're not releasing as many sort of carbons and things as you would the further down that you go elsewhere. So we do it as sustainably as you could possibly do with peat. We take that peat because we malt and peat our own barley. And we are one of fewer than, I think, 10 or 12 distilleries in the world.
I've been telling people 12 now for the past 18 months or something. So let's stick with 12, but also read the small print.
That's it. We think so. I think it's fewer than 10, but it could well be 12. And I think with a couple of the cities that have opened up in the last year or two, they've started doing their own things in-house. So basically, there are next to no distilleries in the world, fewer than 12, we think, that malt and peat their own barley. We are one of those distilleries. Because we do it ourselves, we don't have a huge commercial setup for it. So what we do is it's about 80,000 tons a year of peated barley that we use. And we do it in 2 or 3 batches throughout the year. And we have a very small, at the Gravity Distillery, a very small room purpose built for laying the barley out on the floor to malt it. And then next to it, a shipping container that we have converted into a peat smoker. Something I didn't mention earlier, our 8 founding members were all engineers. They weren't design students and things. They if it works, it works. And a converted shipping container works perfectly fine for peating your barley. So once we've malted the barley, it goes over a conveyor into this shipping container that we have. And then Håkan, our Peter, here's Håkan here, opening the door. He stood in the front 5%, 10% of the shipping container. You can see to the left of him, that little box there, that's the furnace where the peat goes, and our secret ingredient, and which I will reveal in a moment. And he's opening the door there too, as we can see the smoke. That's not a Swedish spa, that is just filled with peat smoke and things. Because we don't have the facilities to make a huge amount of peated barley, we basically make it so that we use small batches of our peat, and I'll explain what I mean by that. We make a very, very, very smoky malt barley. We leave the barley under full smoke for I think 30 to 35 hours, depending on climate and temperature that day, which is very long indeed. And we go to it, and it can be anywhere between 60 and 65 ppm. Which, if there are any Ida fans in here, most of the distilleries that are famous for doing peated whiskey, what ends up being in a bottle is nowhere near that sort of level. However, we don't take that 65% or 65 ppm barley and all of the liquid you have in this glass is from that. When we make a peated whiskey run, so when we are creating our peated whiskey in the distillery, only 23, give or take, only 23% of the barley we use is peated barley. So we go for a very, very, very intensely smoked barley, and then we use a smaller portion of that in the overall mash bill, basically. I appreciate it's all malted barley going in, but call it a mash bill. So it's something like making a peat concentrate, but in a very good, organic, natural sort of way, I would say. And the magic ingredient, the secret magic ingredient that we use, and it's been mentioned in the comments already, is juniper branches. So here we can see, there's some juniper branches there. Juniper grows, it grows all over the world really, but lots and lots and lots of places in Sweden will have juniper growing. There's a power company basically that goes and cuts down juniper branches underneath the big power lines that they have running through the forests, and then donate those juniper branches to us, where they're then dried out, so they're not so filled with resins and things in there. A bit of oiliness left at the end for sure. And into our peat furnace, maybe 1 to 5%, but closer to 1% of that mass will be dried juniper branches in there. And that's, you get a very different type of smoke and peat with us. It can have a dampness to it, can have a resinness to it. A friend of mine described the nose as a campfire in the rain, which I think is quite a poetic, romantic way of describing it. There's like a dampness to the smoke. I think that probably comes from the introduction of juniper branches in there. So we're not talking about, Mick, juniper berries, right? We're not talking about what you're making gin out of. We're talking about the branches, not the berries.
Enough, we actually take off the berries, and use it back at MACKMYRA Brook and our own whiskey distillery where we make our gin now. That's
it. And so that's the secret ingredient. That's how we make things. And as I said, I think I like knowing where things are from and how they're made and stuff. And I think knowing that we're one of fewer than roughly 12 distilleries in the world that go to the hard work of malting and peating our own barley, I've always thought that was a really cool thing to say. And adding juniper branches in isn't just us trying to be different or for the sake of it. Again, going back to one of the founding principles, which was Swedishness. There are thousands of years of history in Scandinavia and in all sorts of other countries of adding things like juniper branches to fires when curing meat and fish for the winter, for the long winter months and things. I think 1,000 years, 2,000 years ago, You've got a long time of there's not much hunting to be done. Few and far between. You've got to make sure that you've got your food stocked for the winter months. And so adding juniper branches in. So that's where there's tradition, basically. It's not just us putting something in to be different and new. There is a long tradition in Scandinavia, especially, of adding juniper branches and other things into fire to get more flavour into food. So you're not just eating the same, dried reindeer or moose or whatever it is for the time. But yeah, that's a bit of the background into how we make the whiskey. What are people saying in the comments?
So we've got Daniela again. Thank you very much for your contributions tonight, Daniela. You're absolutely fantastic. Had this smoke flavour in your nose directly after opening the bowl. Yes, very strong, very nice. Yes, agreed. What's your next comment there as well? And the smoke flavour stays on the tongue quite long. Yes, this isn't a short, sharp finish by any means. This is quite a nice. What I say is, you don't get that peat up front. You have a nice sip and you get some nice fruit forward flavour, some nice sweetness, and then the smoke then comes rolling through the palate on the back. It's not that big punch in the face. So yeah, so that rings true. And I really enjoy Marco's comment here as well. So the last one has a sweet smell, but a spicy taste, very interesting, and a wooden taste at the end. Yeah. So let's break that down. So the sweet smell, we get that from American oak and the Oloroso saturated ex-bourbon casks. Yeah. The spicy taste comes from the Swedish oak casks. Yeah. And the wooden taste at the end, because we used sort of like a speeded up version of maturation, really using smaller casks. So you're going to get a bit more of that wood influence because of that spirit to wood ratio is a lot higher. So hopefully that explains what's going on with that comment there, Marco. And and so that's the reasons why you get those particular things there. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then David chipped in and said, "It tastes very brilliant. I'll take that." Yeah, very good.
Love it.
Keen to know, David, if you let us know, was it David that was on the whiskey on the Peter journey now?
Yes.
David that? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, yeah. Glad that you like this one as well. This is before I started. When I first found MACKMYRA was at a whiskey festival a few years ago, 2018, 2017, 2018, and this and Moment Effa, which is one of these bottles up here. Yeah. But Stjärnrök and that were the two that made me go, oh. I didn't know Swedish whiskey existed until today, and I'm going to drink more of that. So I actually ended up, I've had 2 bottles of this before I even started with us. So, yeah. Well, Mick on the Zoom in. Did you do that purpose? Yeah.
Was not me, sir. Was not me. So no. So another serving suggestion with Stjärnrök is I like to do a rustic spick, or that's Swedish for a rusty nail. So a rusty nail was 2 parts Scotch, 1 part Drambuie. We do our own honey liqueur at MACKMYRA B. So if you can get hold of a MACKMYRA B, we don't make it anymore, so we can get hold of that. So 2 parts Stjärnrök and 1 part MACKMYRA B. Just in a nice whatever glass you want, really, over a nice bit of ice, and job done, really. Just another way of exploring and drinking your whiskey. So I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the evening. We've gone through the 5 drams. Please let us know, just as we're finishing up, what was your favourite in the comments there, please. And we'll try and get to them before we wrap up. So just to emphasise the deal, if you buy a bottle of Stjärnrök and enter Stjärnrök 40 in the voucher section, you'll get 40% off one of the core range bottlings. Until midnight tonight.
Midnight tonight. GMT, I assume this is.
Yes, so this will be GMT. Yes.
So Central Europe would be 11 p.m. I think this deal will cut off. All right, yeah. Stjärnrök 40. Buy a bottle of Stjärnrök, get 40% off of a core range bottle. And there is a code down there after that as well. If somebody doesn't buy anything this evening, isn't able to, there is a second code you can see appear there. Stjärnrök 20. Forget the same process, bottle of Stjärnrök, and then 20% off, which runs from Friday from tomorrow until Sunday. If you're not in the game to buy a bottle tonight, but otherwise you can get a better deal. Cool. All right. Well, let's say everyone, thank you so much for all the comments and things as we've gone. It's been really cool to have such an international audience. Usually Mick and I
international market tonight, yes.
talking to us island monkeys in the UK and no one else. So it's nice to have some sophisticated members of Europe come to join us as well. So thank you so much. And Daniela again at the end saying, wish it would continue. Thank you very much. Daniela, come back. We do other versions of this where we have a different seasonal will be included in the future as well. Björk's have soon, and then in March, April we'll have a new seasonal which will feature in this at the same time. Yeah, exactly. We'll tell you what it is when we get closer to it. But we do these quite regularly now, so it'd be great to have you back another time. And the same goes for everyone else that's joined as well. David, really glad to be part of your peated whiskey journey. I hope it continue, and and we find some other things down the line. Mick, any closing messages from you? I'll say goodbye to everyone and thank you.
I'll be back on February 10th to go through the masterclass, and I'll have two special guests with me. We'll have Stuart McQueen and Steve Laidlaw will be joining us. They're both MACKMYRA fans and have agreed to come in and be my guests. So you'll get a different view. So not just me and Rich doing the whole corporate thing with you, but we'll actually get some feet from the street to join in, as it were, and give their honest opinions, etc. So just another way of varying up the masterclass for you guys at home.
Yeah, sounds good to me, mate. I was saying, and the other messages before we go, everyone who hasn't commented and has joined us, thank you very much, for being on the ride. But then, Marco and Mario as well, just give you guys a shout out and say thanks very much for commenting and let us know what you thought and some of your notes along the way. So on that, I'll say thank you again. I hope to see you soon. Hope everyone's year is a good one, and maybe see you next time. Cheers.
Skål.